Okay, so I think we can start. Welcome, everyone. We are the eSport student chapter at Karolinska, and eSport is an organization that connects professionals, academics, and researchers and students in the fields of health economics and outcome research. We organized today's Lunch and Learn together with KI Alumni, and I think we'll have Megan from this office to join us later. So today we are hosting Amy Leval. Amy is a medical epidemiologist, and currently she is the director of market access at Janssen. And she has worked for many years in the pharmaceutical market, so she will tell herself more about that. And she studied at KI and gained her PhD in epidemiology here. So thank you, Amy, so much for joining us. And we can start.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. And it's really a pleasure to talk with you all here as part of the eSport chapter. I'm really impressed that you have an eSport chapter at the Karolinska, and look forward to hearing more about it and about you here on the call and what you're interested in doing in terms of career development with this master's that you're in. I think I've heard a lot of you are in this master's program for, correct me if I'm wrong, Carla, but health economics, management and policy. Is that the master's program?
Yes, but I think we have also people from different, yeah, we can ask later.
Okay, well, it's great. It's great to have you all here to listen to this about this eSport chapter discussion, and to for those of you who want to learn more about what market access is, and I'll go in pretty soon and explain what a strange name it is and what it's really about. But just a little bit about my background. Thanks, Carla, for the introduction. Yes, I currently work as Director of Market Access in the Global Commercial Strategy Organization at Janssen, which is the pharmaceutical company of Johnson & Johnson. And Johnson & Johnson is actually the world's largest healthcare company. So I'm really happy to work for the Global Strategy Organization, but based here in Stockholm. Actually, we have a small office over at the Karolinska SciLife Lab campus because my organization has a strategic partnership with the Karolinska Institute, and we've had it since 2015, specifically around real world data and real world evidence. So that's part of the partnership that I am responsible for, among other things here at Janssen. I did my PhD at the Karolinska Institute in medical epidemiology over at MEB, which is the Medical Epidemiology and Biostatistics department. It was a great place to do a PhD. If any of you have the opportunity to do any research or your PhDs at MEB, I can highly recommend it. It was really, it's a really big department with a great methods team, really amazing data, thanks to all the wonderful Swedish registers that they tend to focus on and link to make their unique cohorts. They do a lot of high impact research. I feel like every week there was a publication in New England Journal of Medicine or JAMA or something based on these big real world evidence cohorts that the department has and whatnot. And just a lot of great PhD students and postdocs there that made for a phenomenal learning environment. So anyway, that's a pitch for if you guys ever have the opportunity to research or do your PhD at MEB, I wouldn't blink an eye. I think it must be one of the best places to do it in the world, actually, if you're interested in medical epidemiology. Prior to that, I have 2 bachelor's degrees, but one of them is actually, the second one is actually also from the Karolinska Institute in nursing. So I'm also a registered nurse. And then I have another bachelor's degree from the US in social sciences. So all of those degrees actually I use every day, very much so in my current work. I'm very grateful that I have a clinical background because it does help in the types of, not just studies I design, but also the understanding of how clinicians use various types of data and evidence to enrich and enhance and change their practice to improve outcomes. So that's very foremost in my mind. After I finished my PhD at MEB, I went to work for Smittskyddet, which is the smittoenheten, which is the Stockholm Center for Disease Control and Prevention, as an infectious disease epidemiologist, and was responsible for a lot of vaccine research there before I then actually got headhunted to pharma. I didn't think that I would work in pharma. That wasn't my intention when I did that wasn't even on my radar actually when I did my my PhD, and when I wanted to, develop what I wanted to do was be part of an organization that improved healthcare outcomes with innovation. And so when I got headhunted, I was a little bit skeptical, I guess, at first. I had a good job as an epidemiologist for the Stockholm CDC, but I was really impressed with the discussions I had during my interview process and with the teams that were working there, and started in a role, the first role at Janssen in the Nordic organization in outcomes research. So it's been a lot of fun. That was about 7 years ago, and I was able to build outcomes research there, and then started to head up the World Evidence and Epidemiology division there, and then got moved over to the global commercial strategy organization last year. So it's been an interesting ride, and there's a lot of paths forward that can lead to great jobs. So I'm really, like I said, I'm really happy to have this discussion with you. And I'd also want to, those of you who are in these master's programs within, I don't know what the other ones of you are doing, but I know that quite a few on the line are in this master's program in health economics, management and policy. And I just want to say congratulations to your choice in master's, because, this is a real profession that there's just an enormous need for, across various types of organizations, from authorities to hospitals to pharmaceutical organizations. And there's just a lot of great work that you can do with that, with the degrees you'll be getting. So congratulations on a really great choice, and I look forward to just discussing with you guys more. I like discussions, and so you can please, feel free to pop it in any time with a question. We will have time at the end for discussion as well, but if there's something that you really feel like you have to ask, then please do. I'm trying to see here if I see any chat. Oh, there is some on the chat functions too. So yeah, if there are questions that come up on the chat, let me see if I can see those here. Yeah, okay, so please write your question on the chat, and I will be able to monitor it a bit. And if I don't, maybe Carla or Camilla, you can just jump in and let me know if there's a question on the chat that I might have missed.
Sure.
Thanks. So what is market access? And when I first heard about market access, I have to say, I laughed a little bit at the term market, because what market access is patient access. And it kind of seems silly to call it market access when you're really talking about patient access. And I've thought a lot about why it's called market access, when indeed it is about patient access. But I think a lot of it has to do with the global world in which we live, and the complexities of getting in innovative medicines to, for example, national systems. And because it's such a macro type of exercise, I think that's probably why the word market comes in, when it really is about patients. And working in market access is, because it is patient access, it's really on the forefront of bringing these amazing innovations that come in, and they are amazing. I mean, if anyone, as a scientist, when I look at the study results, the phase, the 2s and the phase 3 study results that are the basis for our marketing authorization from the FDA and the EMA, for example, the science is so rigorous, the design of those studies is so rigorous, and to actually make it to be able to bring an innovative product to market, your science has to be so robust. So by the time these amazing innovations get there, then it's up to colleagues in market access or patient access to figure out how do we get these innovations to patients. For example, in the US, it's slightly different, because when the FDA grants market authorization, then the way it works in the US is that the insurance companies that provide insurance and services to individuals have to be able to offer that product and service. But that's not the way it works in Europe at all. In Europe, there are health technology assessment organizations, usually, that, as you very well know, I'm probably speaking to the choir here if you're well into your master's program, that vet the clinical implications and impact of all this great science that's come out. So just because it makes it through all these scientific loopholes with this great evidence that, yes, there's something new about this innovation that we have, you still have to, the various countries still have to decide whether or not it's worth bringing it into its healthcare systems. So, and then even once a country, then, for example, if it's a single payer country, even if they decide, yes, okay, we think this is of good value and we want to bring it into our healthcare system because it is such a good value, it's saving patient lives and it's reducing costs, across various areas. But then, so they might say, yes, okay, we approve this, but then, a lot of them, what market access or patient access is about is really assuring that, for example, if you look at Sweden, for example, once TLV makes a decision, it's still up to a lot of the regions to deliver the healthcare and to make recommendations. So, and then, really a pivotal part of market access is, of course, evaluating how those recommendations get implemented and if patients are really able to get access, for example, to new innovations and treatments, and who is allowed to get access and who's not. And I know Sweden has been great about trying to work with equity. So they're really trying to make sure that there's a fair distribution of innovative medicines across the country. They don't want to see big regional differences, for example, because of that wouldn't be fair, and then that means that basically that patients in certain regions are getting access to medications and having a chance to prolong their lives, for example, where other regions don't. And that's something that, a lot of countries are also trying to work towards mitigating in any way possible. So all of that is market access, but at the end of the day, it's really, how can we assure that patients have a chance to get access to these innovative medicines? And it's not about, I think a lot of people get confused and think it's just about pricing, and it's really not about that. It's really showing, to get a healthcare system to change, they have to really see that it's worth changing practice, meaning that it's really going to bring something to the patient. So I think a lot of, that's another key aspect in terms of working with market access, is to really show the value for patients in taking the time to change your practice to introduce a new innovation. And so it's a long game to change things, and it's really challenging work because the way it works with practice too is you get, as a clinician, you get comfortable with doing things a certain way, and it's quick and it's easy. So to change things requires a lot of evidence and a lot of discussions on why it's even, why bother even. So that's a little bit about market access, and it'll be interesting to hear more too during the discussion there if there's any questions now about if that's what your vision of market access is, well, from your master's program, or if you understand it as something different and more comprehensive, I'd love to hear. So my role, which is I kind of jumped into this in the previous slide. The way I see it is, my key role is to enable patient access. And now that I work for the global strategy organization, it's to enable patient access at various regions across the world. And the way I do that is to really make sure that we have the right evidence available, not just the clinical trial evidence. That's what the regulators really need to see. They need to see that we have the right trial evidence to bring a product to market, meaning that we show that it's both safe and efficacious, in a clinical trial setting. But then we have this, this whole other type of evidence package that you need to generate around the clinical trials to really show why this medicine needs to come in to a broader health setting. So that's part of the role that I do, is just like taking a look at these evidence packages that are coming in from the randomized control trials and whatnot, and seeing what other types of foundational evidence we need to have around there to really show the value of what we're doing, and to really show what types of patients have unmet medical needs and whatnot still out there. So a lot of it too which is why I did my PhD at MEB and looked at a lot of this great Swedish cohort data. And what the Swedish cohort data has, for example, is these longitudinal outcomes like survival, which is pretty important if you're going to show that, if you're going to show that maybe you have a new innovation that increases survival, you have to know what survival is in a real life setting and not just in a clinical trial setting. So that's a lot of what my role entails. And of course, it's to prove the value of this innovation, of the value for society and for patients, and designing studies that show that, and that can try to measure that actually. And if there's not a big value to patients, then it's not that clinically relevant, then there's going to be limited access, because there's no need to bring it into the market then. A lot of it is, and I work now in the pipeline, the earlier pipeline within the company. And so it's a lot about understanding what unmet medical needs are out there in various subgroups. And like I said, everything is data driven within the pharmaceutical industry, which is why it's so great to work in this industry, because it is completely science-based. And it's really amazing to see all the great studies and science that go into trying to get a product approved for use, and also to see how many products just fall along the wayside because they can't make it through these next steps of showing their increased efficacy, safety, and or additional clinical value. My role is very collaborative, meaning that nowadays, and I think you guys, I know you've had some presentations on real world evidence at this eSport chapter here, but real world evidence or real world data is data collected in clinical practice settings, and we're so grateful that it is collected in clinical practice settings. So then we really need to work with people who are experts in those clinical practice settings to ensure that we have the best possible evidence. For example, in some countries like the US, they do tend to syndicate a lot of their real world data assets for use so that you can really explore and examine those. These are really great sources of data. But for example, in the European region, there's not syndicated data. You have to collaborate with local stakeholders who know their data, who know their variables, and really understand how to interpret them to generate any type of robust evidence. So that's what we do to really make sure that we are collaborating with people who really know the data well and really know the clinical setting in which they're used. Foremost is actually to, the beauty of using all of this data that we are collecting on a daily basis and in outcomes research in general is to really foster learning health systems. And this is something we're coming, we're taking huge leaps towards improving learning health systems now with all the data that's available in digital technologies. So that we're constantly, what we want is our health systems that are constantly evaluating, okay, so how is patient access? What are patient outcomes like? How can we do better? How can we make things better for patients? Where can we really improve things? And having this be a constant iterative cycle. So that's something that I think is paramount in my role, and something that just by doing the studies that I do for my little portion of the world and industry, allows these learning health systems to continue to develop all around them. So that's super important. So it's, for me, the reason I get up in the morning is very much patient access, and it's very much about fostering these learning healthcare systems. And that's really what inspires me to do all these studies that we do in collaboration, to really see that happens, and to really improve data infrastructure as well as while we're doing it, to make sure that the right variables are collected and utilized and not forgotten, because there's also, I think now with big data and whatnot, I think we're also seeing that there's an enormous amount of data collected that isn't even used or tapped into, meaning that we can learn a lot more than we're learning to date. So one of the questions I got from some of the organizers here was how my job relates to HEOR, so health economics and outcomes research. So when it comes to health economics, I mean, I think you're all getting your master. Most of you are getting a master's in it, so I think you know a lot about fundamentals of health economics. But health economics builds upon the evidence that comes either from the randomized control trials, or it builds upon evidence coming from epidemiology, so basic incidence and prevalence and rates of things or proportions. So those are the building blocks upon which you then apply your numbers, right? Your cost numbers. I think I see the health economics, outcomes research, and epidemiology all kind of interwoven. I don't see a big difference actually between outcomes research and epidemiology. I think it's pretty much the same thing. And there's also other great words that are buzzed around now, of course, real world evidence and data science and whatnot. But if you look at those, they really are about outcomes research and epidemiology. So we're looking at some exposure, we're looking at some outcome at some point, or looking at some outcome in general, and trying to use that to make decisions or improve our decision making. And I really see kind of health economics as like the icing on this big cake, and this big cake is where all this type of research sits. And that's where like I said, that's where the numbers are coming from. And then you just really on the top thin layer apply the frosting, which is kind of the health economic numbers of what, various systems have for costs. And then, the brilliant thing about working in this type of science is then using these numbers for decision making, because these numbers are really important. There's a lot of decision making that's made upon anecdotal evidence, but really these numbers really help us to really assess in concrete terms what this type of change or even the status quo means for society and for patients. So that's the way I see my job relating. It'll be also interesting to hear if that's kind of what the understanding you all have of what health economics and outcomes research is, and how it relates to what I, to epidemiology. Yeah, let me know, Alex. I'll keep rattling on. I don't have that many more slides, but if there's any questions in the meantime.
Yes, so we got a few questions in the chat, so I can read it. So the first one is from Sarah. She says, I thought market access was only about writing dossier to HTA agencies or as a health economics, working at models for the cost effectiveness analysis. I would love to hear more about what else one can do within this field with this master's.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and of course, writing dossiers or being responsible for the dossiers is of course, a huge responsibility for market access, and the dossiers are really, a huge scientific document that shows the clinical and economic impact for this new innovation that's within the dossier. So that is a key responsibility, but those dossiers are very complicated to write, and great teams work together to write them. You're working together with various scientists and medical affairs colleagues and clinical development colleagues to really understand the fundamentals. And then the part where health economics of course comes in is to really show in various ways the cost effectiveness modeling or budget impact modeling, and just to understand, what kind of modeling is needed for that HTA decision maker to make good decisions. And there are a lot of, I think, I'm always amazed at the great work that NICE does in the UK in terms of, their methodological development for kind of setting the bar as, okay, this is what we need to have in order to assess whether or not this innovation is really worthy of our health system here. Is it gonna, is it worth bringing in? Does it make a big enough clinical difference, and whatnot? And they have all the parameters from which one needs to show things. And I think if you think about the problem with clinical trials being that they're going to have limited follow-up. Clinical trials by nature they have an end date. You cannot design clinical trials that go on forever, and nor would that be fair to patients who are really clamoring for access to innovation so they can have a chance to live. For example, so because of all that, you have with the part where health economics modeling comes in, of course, is okay, how do you extrapolate beyond the end date of the trial to see where the data looks like it might be going into the future, and then what other types of modeling do you do to see, well, what is like I said, what is the underlying rate in the population outside the trial and whatnot. So this is all part of this really enormous work that goes into creating a dossier. And even though that is the main, you could say that is like, as a market access professional, that'll be a main area that you'll focus on, but that work has use outside just a dossier that's submitted to an agency. Of course, that work is really important, that it goes into policy discussions at various levels, that it goes into research and development discussions at various levels. So in addition to submitting your dossier, you're really the one that is able to have all these really important discussions around the content of that, to really shape these healthcare systems to which these are coming in. So I don't know if that answers your question a little bit about work beyond the dossier. I think if you're working on the dossier, you're going to be the one that needs to really work on the policy developments as well, and work on, like I said, work on the research program developments as well. So it won't just be a matter of submitting a dossier and kind of stepping back. Hopefully, there'll be a lot of more work that's in engaging your internal and external stakeholders to really either adopt or change or improve somehow what the current state is.
Thanks. No, I think that clarifies the question. And we have another question. Which kinds of PhD projects would fit best with a market access career? Is the master program enough to pursue such a career?
Yeah, no, definitely a master's program is enough. I think, definitely. So, you can rest assured that this work that you guys are doing now in your master's is enough for a great career in this field. I noted that I have a lot of colleagues who do have PhDs. It's very common but this is also in the area that I work with, because we need to shape the development program, the research development program so much. And that's when having a PhD can come in handy. And it's just more that there is that, I think you could do the same work with a master's too, but sometimes when you get a PhD, you just get a little bit more confidence in vetting your science, right? So you can really question design and methods in a much more convincing way sometimes for yourself. But you do not need a PhD to do that. You can very much do that without a PhD. But if you were, to do a PhD and then continue within market access, that's, I think doing a PhD is just just a little pot of joy, is what I like to say. Yeah, you basically get 4 years or 4 to 5 years where you just really get to focus and develop and write and really do a lot of great thinking work and collaboration. And that's just it's just a wonderful opportunity in life in general. So if you have that opportunity and feel like that you can afford it in terms of salary loss, then I would recommend doing it for your own development more than anything. But in terms of what types of projects would help you in market access, I think any type of project that works with epidemiological or outcomes research is going to help you in market access. I know, I've worked with some people even at the Karolinska who did PhDs in more health economic areas, and of course, there's a lot that one can do there as well. I know there are some great people that are working in those fields at the Karolinska as well. Martin Neovius and whatnot is one, and and if you look at the PhDs that have come out of those departments, those are really interesting too. I think anything that's related to epidemiology methods or health economics, outcomes research, public health, those are all really relevant for continued careers in market access for sure.
Thanks. And we have another question about your personal growth. So what skills did you found that you gained through your profession?
Yeah, that's a big question. That's I feel like I'm learning all the time, and I think this is one reason I'm so happy to work right now in the pharmaceutical industry is because there's never-ending knowledge that's constantly being explored and generated and created, and there's never a dull moment in terms of the bar is so high, and I personally enjoy working in that type of atmosphere where there's so much to learn. One thing I really do appreciate too with the pharmaceutical industry, and I can only speak for Janssen because I've only worked at Janssen in the pharmaceutical industry, but it's my colleagues are so smart and they're so sharp, and it's such a joy to work with such smart people. And I have to say, one thing that I also appreciate working in industry is that my colleagues are very collaborative. We're within the industry, you're used to trying to solve problems as a team, and that's always a pleasure, and that's been a lot of great development work for me, because in a way I have to kind of get my ego out of the way and really do what's needed to do to make it better for the whole team and whatever it is that we're working on together. And that for me comes with a lot of great development and a lot of surprise too, because I'm limited in my capacity for solving problems, but then you put people together to solve problems, and amazing things do happen. So I'm constantly developing in terms of that. And it's great to see how, I have to say J&J is a great organization, Johnson & Johnson, and it's really nice to see how good organizations are run, and the kind of, just from an organizational psychology perspective, what kind of infrastructure they build in order to foster good work. So, and that's, as a leader too, that's really important for me to think about, what environment am I creating for my team to feel good? and then do good work. And I think a lot of it is too, that's really important to me, is kind of, like I said, getting out of the way so that they can, like, you know, they're not hitting any ceiling, and they can really do the best of their potential. And this is something too that I think we're allowed to see within this framework. That's really nice to see. So I've had a lot of, you know, development at this company within my other employers too. I've worked for hospitals, and I've worked for, like I said, the CDC. I actually had a wonderful opportunity this summer. Johnson & Johnson has a great volunteer program for medical professionals to go and work with COVID-19 care. So they basically told, you know, the whole company, the J&J globally said, you know, any medical professional that wants to work on the front lines with COVID care, we will, you know, you can volunteer to do that. And, you know, and so I could keep my job and my salary and volunteer to work, which is what I was able to do this summer. I worked at the Karolinska University Hospital infectious disease clinic there, and I went back to work as a critical care nurse to help with the pandemic efforts. And I think, you know, that the type of development that I never thought I'd set foot in a hospital again. And I didn't think I'd do hospital nursing ever again. So for me, that was, you know, that was an incredible opportunity, just to throw myself into that again, to see how, I mean, just to be inspired by the doctors and nurses that are working there and the amazing work they do, and especially during the pandemic, and, you know, and how they're set up, and just, you know, I just had, you know, it gave me faith in the healthcare system, and of course, you know, they're doing such a wonderful work there on the front lines, and, you know, just to have the opportunity from J&J to be part of that, you know, was a huge personal development for me, and I think it just showed me a lot too about, and I think to you all, now that you are finishing up your master's here and will start to work, is you don't need to do everything yourself. This is, you know, what I really learned in the hospital this summer too, is, you know, there's always someone to ask if you need help, and there's always someone willing to help if you need help. And, you know, you really need it, just like I do at work. I use my experts. I don't feel that I need to know everything. I just need to know people who can, you know, help me figure stuff out, or who know things. And the same is very much true in, you know, in the hospital setting, in terms of, you know, getting the best patient care. It's really just about, you know, asking people if there's a doubt, or if you really want to make sure something's even better, and people are really willing to help out and work at it together. So having faith in that is, you know, I think it's important, and not to feel, you know, I think when I stopped my PhD at the Karolinska, I got out of, you know, did my dissertation, and I see this a lot with a lot of new PhDs out there, is there's this expectation that you do it all yourself, because that's part of the PhD, you know, program, is that you really are responsible for your studies, and, you know, and every part of them. So it's really amazing that you come into a working environment where it's okay to be part of a team. You don't have to do it all yourself. You can get help where you need. So I think it's a nice thing to kind of segue into, as you know, or to remind yourselves of that. You don't have to, you know, the education you have now, or you're getting now, is going to give you these great building blocks and tools that you can use. But, you know, you'll just keep building and growing. It's never ending, hopefully. And hopefully, I think within this field that you guys are all in, you know, be it public health, or be it, you know, EPI, or be it, you know, HEOR, or market access, you guys will, you know, there's loads of different jobs out there that, you know, that utilize these skill sets and that are needed in society. So, you know, like I said, congratulations on a good choice in what to, you know, focus your studies on.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing this very interesting experience. And so related to that, I was wondering, you said that, like, your clinical background and also this experience that you had recently is important for your job. So in which aspects, like concretely in your daily decisions and projects, how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always have this sense of, okay, what would this, in order for, you know, if I'm coming in with a new medical innovation, but I think, you know, I looked at all the science, looked at all the data, I think this is something that we really should put into clinical practice. This will save lives, right? That's what we're looking at. But then I think, okay, so if I were in my clinical shoes, what would it take for me to adopt this in practice? And it, you know, what would it take for my healthcare system to adopt this in practice? And I think because of my clinical background, I had this understanding of what it takes to change practice within a system, and what it takes to change practice for an individual. So I'm always kind of having the, you know, the systemic thinking and the individual thinking, because change is, you know, or behavioral science, right? It's not quick. There's a lot of other factors that are involved. So, you know, I just put myself in the shoes of a practitioner or a decision maker in a, in a hospital, and really try to understand what would enable them to feel good about, improving their practice with the science that I see here. And what would it mean for them to adopt that, and what's needed for them to make this change, and also knowing what a huge, like I said, it's an enormous, it's an fostering change in a healthcare system is enormous. It's not a small, it's like moving mountains sometimes, really, because of the way the systems are built and structured, and because of the way people's habits are built and structured, right? So to kind of foster this change just takes a lot of momentum and a lot of work. And I think, but just with my clinical background, I understand and see what's needed. And I think sometimes I see people who don't have a clinical background who think, like, oh, what's the, especially with outcomes research, they'll be like, what's the big deal? Just ask them to fill in this one document here on X, Y, or Z parameter, and then we'd have everything we need for, some type of agreement that could, foster whatever outcomes-based agreements or whatever that is the new phase or fad. And I think, but then you realize you have to take a step back, and if I think, okay, if I had that clinical hat on again, and think, okay, really what's needed in order to get to document what's needed to be documented for a certain type of performance-based agreement, for example, and just knowing that, but literally the clinicians have zero time in which to do that, and to open up a new system and do that, you're going to have a lot of missing, it's going to be incomplete, and all these other things of it, so we really have to foster better digital solutions to enable X, Y, or Z, and it's just that kind of thinking. So I'm not just expecting clinicians to just kind of fill in forms and respond and be able to track what's needed to be tracked for various health economic purposes. I think we need to let clinicians be clinicians, and I think we need to let the systems that work around them do what they need to do to get the information, to translate that, but not put that all on the clinicians. So I think that's kind of where it comes in too, is just this kind of understanding of what's feasible in practice and what's not going to be feasible. What's in it for clinicians who are on their knees anyway, they're doing the best they can. And they're really advocating for their patients' best. And you see that when you work in clinical practice. There's, people want the best for patients, and they do whatever they can to do that. So it's just understanding where they're coming from too. That's so important.
Thanks. And so now we have a bunch of questions related to J&J. So how does it work, like the global division, and then is there, are you based in Sweden? Where is your team based? And then also like any opportunities for like entry-level masters in your area?
Yeah, so to start with the first one, yeah, so I have a team that is based here in Stockholm, and the reason we are based here in Stockholm, just see the reason I'll try to go down more. Never mind. I have one picture of who I collaborate with, but for some reason there we go. So my team is based here in Stockholm because, and it's the global team from J&J or Janssen has a team based here in Stockholm because of our strategic partnerships and because of the great data that exists here in the Nordics that are used across functions. So they're used by various teams. They're used by the epidemiology team. There's been a lot of post-authorization safety studies that have traditionally been placed here in the Nordics. They're used by the data sciences teams for drug discovery. They're used by the outcomes research and health economics teams to improve dossiers around the world, for example, with good research. So because of that, we have this team based here in the Nordics or in Sweden to work with our partnership with the Karolinska Institute. And the colleagues that I continually work with, like on a daily basis, or these, at J&J are the colleagues that I, just for example, just here on the screen, like, colleagues from medical affairs, and a lot of these are basically functions, maybe with the exception of epidemiology and statistics, that have local presence as well. So medical affairs, research and development, regulatory. I know you guys have had a pharmacovigilance call here too as well, so we work very closely with those guys. Epidemiology, they're the ones that do, like I said, they set up all the safety studies and the long-term follow-up studies, and they use a lot of big data resources to do that. Statistics, of course, and of course government affairs and policy all the time, because it's always about policy discussions with HTA officials and whatnot. So these are the kind of groups that I'm working with. My global my global role, but also these are, like I said, these are the same groups that I worked with when I had a local role. And the team, you know, I think a lot of the big pharmaceutical companies have these types of teams set up locally too, definitely, just to be able to, and do a lot of good studies here in Sweden, either be it clinical trials or a lot of this other type of outcomes research, which is really big here. You know, when it comes to entry-level masters, that can be a bit difficult. I think I've had a couple of master's students throughout the years, but finding them the correct type of project is a little bit, can be a bit tricky unless there's something that, you know, that just happens to be sitting on the table that is kind of ready for analytics or ready for development or something that they've kind of come in and would like to do. I think, you know, when it comes to your master's thesis work, it depends on a lot on, you know, your interest and your capacity and why you want to, you know, work within a pharmaceutical industry. I've also had to turn away a lot just because the timing has been off, or I didn't see, you know, that there would be a project that would come up, you know. Often I think too, you know, if you're, and I know you guys, this may be hard for you, but you know, the more you can plan ahead, the better, because if you're any type of last minute thing, there's just the likelihood of finding a good project is going to be, you know, smaller and smaller. But yeah, I think, you know, so yeah, that's always a hard one to, you know, but I guess I don't know how your master's programs are set up if you just, you know, because your thesis doesn't necessarily have to be connected to, you know, you can do that independently. It doesn't have to be set up with a company. I know there's the difference, of course, between thesis and exiob and all of that things. You know, you can basically, from my understanding, you don't need a company to do your thesis. You can do your thesis work independently and just, you know, have it be relevant for the field. But of course, sometimes, yeah, you can. I had a great statistician once that did a master's with me, but, you know, he really came in, you know, wanting to develop a specific method for survival research. And that was something that, you know, he had this specific interest and we had some good data that we could collaborate around, and that made it a little bit more applicable. But if, you know, unless someone's coming in with that kind of specific, you know, skill set, it can be hard with just an entry-level master's thesis. That doesn't really kind of work. I think there are, I'm not sure if there are some, there's a, you know, jnj.com anyway, if you get, there are some jobs that are posted, and I know there's sometimes some MBA related work. I don't know if it's thesis more or just entry level, but it's, you know, it's always good to check out the company's career websites and see what they have out there.
Thank you, Amy. So I think now some people need to leave for lectures. So I would thank you very much. And I think Megan from KI Alumni was able to join now, and just to, maybe she wants to say.
She's on mute still. But again, it is the top of the hour, but thank you guys so much for this opportunity to talk with you, and yeah, good luck in your theses and your work. Yeah.
Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Take care.
Yeah, it was really nice to have you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.